Hi, Max Kesier. This is the Kesier Report. Ooh, I've got the vapors. Stacy?
Max, the vaporized and the deleted. It's the American soap opera. Money from MF Global feared gone. Nearly 3 months after MF Global collapsed, officials hunting for an estimated $1.2 billion in missing customer money increasingly believe that much of it might never be recovered. The findings so far suggest that a significant amount of the money could have been vaporized.
Yeah, it's vaporized. The $1.2 billion may have been vaporized. Now, the same people say that they can search through a stack of 1 billion tweets and find one with some offending text that would necessitate the detention of British people in a U.S. airport. The same people who can track a razor that was sold at Walmart 10 years ago in a landfill emitting some kind of RFID tag that would account for some inventory adjustment as part of an accounting fraud at Walmart, as part of the overall accounting fraud that is the U.S. economy, that is the overall accounting fraud that is Wall Street, that is the accounting fraud that is the Constitution, are saying that, oh, $1.2 billion, we can't find it. I thought it was in my sock. The only one who can get away successfully with that kind of defense are pimps in Harlem. Oh, that's right, you are a pimp in frickin' Harlem!
Well, they claim that it's a result of the chaotic trading the week before the firm collapsed. Now remember also, we learned that banks can now trade at a speed faster than the speed of light. So perhaps they're trying to use physics and quantum physics as a sort of excuse for their reckless behavior, well, their crimes.
Oh, like Schrodinger's cat, that experiment in quantum physics. Was it, if the cat's here, the cat's there, he's dead, he's not dead. So they're trading it faster than the speed of light. So 1.2 billion, it was a phase shift. The money exists, but it's in a parallel universe. By the way, there is a parallel universe. It's called the Securities and Exchange Commission. Apparently you can commit any frickin' fraud you want, and you don't have to pay any kind of penalty or go to jail.
Certain people, of course. Now, Jesse's Cafe American looks at this MF Global vaporized story and sees essentially a cover-up using as well the media. The media is complicit in this and allowing J.P. Morgan. We know that the money has been found in J.P. Morgan's account, that J.P. Morgan was coincidentally owed $1.2 billion. MF Global, a despicable state of affairs. This entire charade has been cloaked with the public relations campaign using terms like missing, vaporized, and mystery to describe the customer assets as if no one really knows where the funds had gone, which the CFTC has explicitly stated months ago is not the case.
You know, they can't have any kind of accounting procedures that are adequate to track down $1 billion. Remember, they lost $7 billion in Iraq. Remember, they airlifted $7 billion to pay off bribes and went missing. Donald Rumsfeld, wink, wink. So here you are missing $1 billion. You get a lot of people starving to death in the gutter in America, but they're collateral damage. Who cares? They're losers.
You mentioned Donald Rumsfeld and the Fallujah and the war in Iraq, and there were terms like there are known unknowns and unknown unknowns and unknown knowns. And this is the same sort of excuse that MF Global and J.P. Morgan are using. It's unknown whether we know whether we took the money or not.
Yeah, we're not sure whether we stole the money. He's just sitting in front of a stack of cash. Jamie Dimon says, I don't know where it could have gone.
Well, by the way, you know, vulture funds are offering 85 cents on the dollar for MF Global customers. So that would be interesting to actually see these vulture funds. You know, we're used to them shaking down African nations, whether or not they could get away with shaking down the third world dictator of like Jamie Dimon.
Right, the economic hitmen and the vulture funds that operate in the third world, Latin America. They go down there. If they don't get the money, they throw a dictator out of a plane down there in Central America, South America. So presumably we're going to see Jamie Dimon falling from the sky one of these days from one of these vulture funds. Oh, I forgot my parachute. There's Jamie, splat.
Well, returning to the soap opera of America, mega trash. 50 million users' data set to be deleted. So, you know, Mega Upload was shut down by the Department of Justice. They had a 10-day warrant, search warrant. They took all the data they needed, and they said here to the hosts, the service providers, they said you could delete any data you want now. Now, there's some controversy or not whether they'll allow customers to actually retrieve their data. But the fact is, Joe Bag of Donuts, who has his own data uploaded to Mega Upload, he's deleted.
Well, that's a pattern of destruction of private property. America, supposedly, the capitalist system is built on private property, not the communal property of the defunct political systems of bygone days of communalism. No, no. We have private property. That's what makes the country so great. Oh, except when we lost that $1 billion for Jamie's bonus, then we had to steal it from you because, oh, the Mega Upload data, we had to steal that too. Because private property is just an idea, but we don't respect it here in this country. You know, Hayek wrote that book, The Road to Serfdom, which is supposed to be a treatise against communal property, what happens when the so-called lefties take over. It turns out he was right, except the threat is from the right wing, wholesale theft of all private property that doesn't fit in with the ideology of America. Let's kill all the people! Let's kill everybody! That's the current White House mode of thinking. Assassinations and wealth confiscation, destruction of private property. Thank you, Obama. You're a swell guy.
Well, actually, he's in the next headline. Speaking of the vaporized and deleted, much of the population of America have had their jobs and their wealth and their income vaporized and deleted. Obama tells women, interesting, unemployed husband can't find job. So here's a woman in Texas, and her husband is an engineer, and she's asking why he can't find a job.
Jennifer, can I ask you what kind of engineer your husband is?
He's a semiconductor engineer.
See, it is interesting to me, and I meant what I said. If you send me your husband's resume, I'd be interested in finding out exactly what's happening right there, because the word we're getting is that somebody in that kind of high-tech field, that kind of engineer, should be able to find something right away.
Yeah, oh, there are jobs available, as Obama described them, but they're in China and India. And one of the other great travesties of this age of globalization or non-globalization is that Americans who want to get those jobs in India and China that were sent to those countries, they're not really allowed to go to those countries and work at those jobs. They're stuck in that prison industrial nightmare that is the United States of America, ending up being incarcerated by Corrections Corps of America and the prison industrial complex. Be a good American, get sent to jail. But you can't get a job. You can't go to China and India to get a job. The wealthy can move their money to China and India. My money moves around the world a lot easier than I can, believe me. When I go to cross the border, they stick something up my schwing saying, oh, are you really a friend of Jamie's? Because if you're not, we're going to cattle prod you up your schwing. Only the friends of Jamie are allowed in this country.
Well, Obama promised that if she sent him her husband's resume, he would go looking for a job for her. But he's going to have to go to China, of course, because despite Obama's hangout hope, U.S. semiconductor jobs are still going away. So the National Science Foundation reports that domestic high-tech manufacturing jobs have declined by 28% since 2000. Some 687,000 jobs. Even R&D, research and development, is increasingly being performed overseas by large multinationals, notes the report. So yes, if you could build something for the web, it may be easy to score a job at Facebook or Google or as an app developer. But for Americans like this woman's husband, a semiconductor engineer, your chances of finding a job are pretty slim.
Well, what he should do is take a ball-peen hammer or a large phone book and slap himself on the head really hard until he's semi-unconscious. Then go on Facebook and get on a game like Farmville or Factoryville or Planetville or Americaville and pretend to be working virtually in a real, make sure you're not really conscious because you don't want the reality of this to set in. And at the end of a day or two, you've accumulated enough Facebook credits to buy yourself a cup of coffee. And then, go stimulate your brain with caffeine and say, look, honey, I'm working in a factory. Don't tell her it's a virtual factory and you're working, 17, 18 hours a day for $1, and that might upset her.
Well, we talked about the vaporized and deleted, but, matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed. The jobs, it appears, are all sound, healthy, and well, and have been found. China's factories in strong start to 2012. The Chinese manufacturing sector has made a surprisingly strong start to the year, with domestic orders cushioning the impact of Europe's debt woes, according to an official survey. The Purchasing Managers' Index, an important gauge of factory growth, rose to 50.5 in January from 50.3 a month earlier. Anything above 50 means manufacturing is growing.
How many Chinese does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1 million. But they still have a better job than 1 million Americans.
Well, as they say, even though Europe is collapsing and their imports from China are slowing, domestic consumption in China, which now have all these great jobs, it's growing.
Yeah, plus China doesn't want to see the dollar do very well either. They'd rather have the euro survive, so that's another part of the currency wars.
Well, as the China Money Report says, and I know you're interviewing Daniel Collins in the second half, Americans to become sharecroppers in their own country as printed money boomerangs back to the developed world to buy up companies. So, you know, the big news this week was that Sany, a Chinese company, is buying Putzmeister, a German concrete pump maker, one of those legendary Mittelstand companies in Germany, the backbone of German industrial strength. Well, Daniel Collins says, for decades, Asia has performed the role of the diligent worker bee. Without a history of Adam Smith and free trade, they saw how easy it was to game the free trade system. To this day, Koreans do not buy Japanese goods and Japanese do not buy Korean goods. Neither one will buy U.S. goods. The stuff they do want, like Hollywood movies, they just take. The U.S. took the brunt of the free trade economic carnage as over 50,000 factories have closed down in only the last 10 years in America. No one can labor arbitrage and transfer price their taxes away like corporate America. We are still number one in that game.
Right, sharecroppers. Remember Warren Buffett said a few years ago that America would become a nation of sharecroppers. Look it up. Do the search. It's exactly what he said.
And he also went to Germany hoping to buy some of these Mittelstand companies. He was there, remember, for a few years looking to buy anything. Now it turns out that the Chinese are actually buying up those companies.
Another 2 or 3 years, and as I've been predicting, America's #1 export will be cotton. American labor will be cotton pickers. We're back to the plantation, y'all, but only a few of you can live in the big house. All right, Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Kesier Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there.
Welcome to the future.
Science, technology, innovation, all the latest developments from around Russia.
We've got the future covered.
Welcome back to the Kesier Report. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton. Yeah, sharecropping, plantation owning, American economy. Hey, let's go to Shanghai and speak with Dan Collins of the ChinaMoneyReport.com. Dan Collins, welcome back to the Kesier Report.
Thanks, Max. Good to be back.
All right, Dan Collins, you say that Americans are sharecroppers in their own country. Explain.
Yeah, this originated from an article I wrote. Tried to get my mind around the concept of how all of these decades of printed money and trade surpluses are going to get recycled back into the American economy. I believe in the U.S. now, many of the politicians and maybe the thought leaders there believe that we can continue to print money to get our way out of this. But what they forget is that debts have owners. And you look at China now with $3.2 trillion in currency reserves, Japan over $1 trillion. I believe a lot of this money now sitting in Asian central banks is going to find its way back into the United States, back into Europe, buying up real companies. We saw on Christmas this year, 2011, Japan and China signed a new currency swap agreement where they said openly and publicly that they want to move their trade into their local currencies and get out of the dollar. We're starting to see treasury sales. China has the lowest amount of treasuries in over 18 months. So they're down to about 1.1 trillion. Russia sold half their treasuries last year. So I think as we start to see the continued dollar debasement coming out of the United States, what people have not factored in is what about all of this money sitting all over the world? What's going to happen to it? This last week in Germany, we saw a Chinese company, Sany, purchased for about $500 million, a very large German company. We're going to start to see this. We're going to see Asian countries start taking this money, send it back to developed markets, and buy up real companies with it. And it's going to be a major trend, I think, coming in the future.
All right. Well, in the United States, it seems like they're prepping the landscape for these Chinese companies to come in and buy strategic U.S. assets. So they have totally destroyed the unions. They've introduced the prison industrial complex, make it very easy to put people in prison. They have more of a Chinese-style state capitalism now with the Politburo of the Federal Open Market Committee. It's no longer free market capitalism. So they're laying the groundwork for a Chinese, setting the table so that the China can come in and buy a company and hit the ground running, so to speak, without too much problem. So it seems like America is doing its best to accommodate their new overlords, the Chinese. Now, many commentators in America, of course, dismiss China as the low-wage, low-value manufacturer of global predominance. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot of China naysayers. There's a recent article this last few weeks in Forbes by Gordon Chang, who's a big China naysayer. Wrote a book called The Coming Collapse of China. The only problem was he wrote the book in 1998. So we look at the structure of the Chinese economy. What does China export to the United States? What does the United States export to China? You look at the real numbers. The major exports from the United States to China last year was corn, soybeans, scrap steel, and scrap plastic. Looks more like a 18th century economy, what we see in the United States. The other hand, what you see is China exporting, their number one export to the United States is now electronic equipment and manufactured electronics. So China started 20 years ago on the low-wage, low-value-added end, but it's starting to work up, and many American companies are going to get global competitors coming out of China in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned scrap metal, scrap paper. Yeah, if you look at the list of exports from top 20 states that export to China from the United States, number 2 or number 3 on that list is always garbage. America is excellent at exporting its garbage to China, like scrap paper, for example, which, of course, China recycles into cardboard boxes, and resells back to the United States, and has made many, many billions of dollars for people over there who are not afraid of doing a day's work. Of course, in America, that's not in the cards anymore. It's more about getting that electronic payment down there at the Walmart to pick up some baby formula. Now, Stephen Roach and Jim Rogers are almost alone amongst Western commentators in praising the medium and long term for Chinese economy and claiming that any short-term housing market or economic slowdown will be a soft landing. So those guys are in the pro-China camp. You're there in Shanghai. So it's not either whether it's a soft landing or a hard landing. You're saying whatever the landing is, it doesn't make much difference. The one clear trend is that they're going to take their cash pile of money and start buying into countries like the U.S., correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we talk about the Chinese economy, a lot of the anti-China stuff, it relates to housing. You know, the Americans have for 20 years lived in a printed money, transfer payment, military industrial complex economy. They just went through a housing bubble, so they believe everybody should have a housing bubble. What they don't realize here is half of the homes in China have been paid with cash. The other half have at least 30% down payment. So there is no credit bubble, so to speak, in housing. China has experienced somewhat of, you could slow down, if you could call it a slowdown, you know, at 8 or 9% GDP growth. But really, what people forget is that this is an engineered slowdown. China wanted to slow down the economy. Growing at 12% a year, it was too fast with a high inflation environment with all these central banks continuously printing money last year. A corporate loan now in China is 9%. There's draconian laws to stop people from purchasing homes. So you can only literally purchase one home right now. You can't purchase another one if you already own one. So I don't see a troubled economy in economy where people are buying cars and homes for cash and where you have to try to slow down the growth. I see the big trouble in the United States where last year we went into a $5 trillion debt, gap-adjusted debt, which is on balance sheet and off balance sheet liabilities, to create 1% GDP growth. That's more what I'm worried about.
Let's move on to gold for a second, because Forbes, that mouthpiece of the entrenched kleptocracy, is recently talking about why China is buying gold because it's capital flight and it's not strategic in any way. But it seems we hear a lot of people talking about strategically China wants to buy gold to insulate itself against a collapsing dollar. Your thoughts?
Yeah, buying gold, Forbes is obviously working their own agenda here. Buying gold in China and capital flight there's absolutely no correlation there. Last week, Beijing Daily reported there was over $100 million in gold sales in Beijing alone. The gold stores had lines out the door, and gold has really become a big Chinese New Year's gift here in China. It's sales in the first week after New Year's were up 50% from last year. This gold is not going overseas with people leaving on planes. It's getting put into families to be handed down generation after generation. The capital flight issue is an entirely separate issue. If you look at a lot of the wealthy people in China, there is a lot of corruption here. There's no doubt. There's a lot of ill-gotten gains. And a lot of capital flight is due to some people in China diversifying their assets. If they're ever caught, or if somebody discovers how they've made their money, they need a getaway plan. And there's some people that have prepared that. That's where most of the capital flight issues are coming from.
All right, we've got a couple of minutes left. I want to cover some topics here. You recently compared the Chinese and U.S. economies, but you didn't use the manipulated GDP numbers, but on raw data. Succinctly, what did you find, Dan Collins?
Yeah, I find GDP is really have some problems with it. It's almost an obsession with the American academics. But in reality, does anybody really look out the window as they fly over the cities in the United States? Look at Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and now the empty suburbs near Vegas. Where's the economic growth? I just don't see it. I took a look at the numbers. The U.S. has a $15 trillion GDP, and China has a $7 trillion GDP, which means the United States is roughly, more than twice as large as China. But China makes 10 times the amount of steel, 3 times as many vehicles. They consume twice as much beer. They export 3 times as much as many high-tech exports as the United States does. 3 times as much cotton, 5 times as much coal. The lists go on and on. The cell phone market's 3 times as large. So I'm just wondering how, if we deduct printed money and government transfer payments, what would the GDP of the United States really be? I think that's really a bubble that nobody sees, is that the American GDP is a complete fabrication. And I would also highlight the manufacturing numbers. Many people, including academics, high-level policymakers in the United States, they will tell you, well, we don't need to worry. The United States is still the largest manufacturing economy. The Federal Reserve has admitted they don't break out the value add in those numbers. So, the United States has 9 million people working in manufacturing. I can drive within an hour of where I'm sitting right now and find 9 million people working in manufacturing. There's no way the United States has a larger manufacturing economy than China, yet we still live by these illusions on our numbers.
Nobody pretends that America has a manufacturing economy or GDP tied to manufacturing. It's tied not to making stuff, but to blowing stuff up. The military-industrial complex is a huge part of the GDP, and debt, which fuels the military-industrial complex, is a huge part of the GDP. Shock and awe was a huge GDP booster in America. All right, now we only got a minute left. Intellectual property. China makes all the stuff, but Apple Computer gets all the IP glory. When is China going to do their own IP?
Yeah, this is the thing China struggles with. They know that We'll have to see if they really can turn it around. I think, Japan got a rap 10, 15 years ago for not having any innovation. I think that was largely overblown. Japanese companies learned to create their own IP. Korean companies learned to create their own IP. I think China is on its way. I mean, at first, when you're developing an economy, you're focused on import substitution and being able to make your own products just based off what's already out there. I think now you see a lot of vehicle market. You see the major car makers, General Motors and Ford, are doing a lot of their R&D, electrical vehicle manufacturing R&D is going to be done in China. They're tailor-making the cars for China that will then go all over the world. So I think Chinese companies are behind on IP. They know that. And we'll have to see that develop over, that's really a soft skill. And I think we'll continue to see that develop over the next decade.
Yeah, they're going to be forever behind the curve unless they relax censorship, because you got to be able to say some crazy stuff to come up with some crazy ideas that get patented that drive IP. That's all the time we have. Daniel Collins, thanks so much for being on the Kesier Report.
Thanks very much, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Kesier Report with me, Max Kesier, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Daniel Collins, over there in Shanghai. If you want to send me an email, please do so at KesierReport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Kesier saying bye, y'all.